when you have got a soil, pretty much the parent rock that was in that landscape is what the soil was formed from. Unless it's often in the alluvial soils, what's happened is soil would have washed off the landscape and would have come above the layer of the parent rock. But either way, the soil has come from a type of rock that's gradually broken down and weathered over time, and that will determine the initial sort of characteristics of your soil, initial chemical characteristics. And if you're going to do a soil test, it's just being aware of what the soil test is telling you, because there's lots of different types of soil tests. So at any one time, the nutrients in your soil, there's going to be some that are soluble, dissolved in the soil water, and normally when you apply soluble fertiliser there, it's actually a soluble form that will dissolve in the water when it rains and so on. There's also, when we talked about the clay or the humus, that's holding onto nutrients. So they are kind of soluble, but they're getting held in the soil. They won't just wash away with water. So the plants can grab them and use them, but at least they're stable and not washing away into the rivers and stuff. There's obviously going to be nutrients inside the soil organisms that are there, inside their bodies. And soil, especially any time there's a living thing, it's got a cell, and there's a sort of a suite of nutrients that are in a cell that are pretty balanced for living processes. So when we talk about plants eating microbes, not only do they get compounds, not just nutrients, but they get a good balance of nutrients from eating, those things that are contained in the cell. So there's nutrients in there. There's obviously nutrients within the organic matter, like the residue, all that sort of stuff. And then in the actual soil particles that haven't been broken down yet, there's minerals in that. And these nutrients are in a state of flux. At any time, there'll be more in the solution. When it's dry, there'll be less in the solution. Plants will be taking it off the exchange sites, getting replaced, organisms liberating things from the soil matrix, and so on and so on. So I guess the thing I want to say is that when you do a soil test, your traditional soil tests, those are the two things that generally get picked up on the traditional soil test. So what's already in the soil water and is naturally going to be available to the plants, and what's on the exchange sites. Soil tests are not exacting, that's just an estimate, but they generally don't pick up this stuff here. So if you do a soil test, and you might think that you need a whole lot of stuff, but there might actually be some supplies in these as well. So when Murray talks about it being a fertiliser sales thing, that's sort of what he's talking about. Then there's all these other qualities that affect your nutrient availability. So your texture of your soil, so if it's got a lot of clay in it, it's going to hold on to a lot of things. So it's got what they call a good cation exchange capacity that holds on to the positive nutrients. Some soils will buffer phosphorus, they'll lock it up and hold on to it as well. Your pH of your soil is going to affect the availability of the nutrients. Redox state. It's a terrible thing to get into after lunch, isn't it? Your redox state is basically, it's kind of like how much energy your soil has in it. You know how when we burn something it needs oxygen to burn? So if your soil has a lot of photosynthesis, it's putting energy into your soil. But if your soil, on the flip side, if you're doing a lot of things like tilling and just exposing your soil to the elements, the wind, the sun, then that's a very oxidizing process that burns energy off. And if your soil is very low energy, it will have a low redox state. And a lot of nutrients are not available in that low energy sort of state. Obviously in your soil, your carbon levels, your biological activity, all of these things, your moisture, are going to affect how much of your nutrients are available to your plants. So it's not just an absolute number that you get on the soil test and go, yep, this is what I've got and this is what I haven't got. This is just an example of just taking a field pH test and just showing you that some of these nutrients are, start to tail off, their availability changes as you get too acidic or too alkaline, especially extreme alkalinity. There's certain ones like, say, iron here, even at some of the pHs that you think are quite good, like 7, they start to tail off, which is why you might have iron deficiencies even if your soil is really, it's got high in iron. So yeah, obviously all these things are going to affect it, and without getting too technical. This is someone who's coupled redox with pH. So I'm using iron as an example because it's kind of universally deficient, and it's ironic because it's the one trace element we have lots of on our soil, but it's also universally deficient in our plants. And one of the reasons is because our soils are oxidised. As they get more oxidised, lower energy, they're up here. And as they're more reduced or high energy, they're down here. So even if you've got a pH, your soil's in a good pH range, like it's still getting to the acidic side, I'd say it's around 6. But if your soil is oxidised, it's not going to be available. And as soon as your soil gets over sort of 6.5, iron is not available. So, you know, it just doesn't matter how much you got in West Australia with the iron, you know, iron everywhere, but yeah, it's often deficient for a number of reasons. So that's why maybe you might need trace elements for a lot of stuff you can just do by digging a hole. You know, you can see a lot. You can see an awful lot. You can see what the structure's like, the texture, the colour. You can see how moist it is. You know, where it's drying out in the profile. You might have. It's worth digging a big hole when you start an orchard because you're going to have to plant trees that are going to grow quite deep root systems. So you want to see if you're hitting some subsurface layers of bedrock, clay, gravel, all those wonderful things. You want to check all that stuff out. So it's worth digging a good profile at the very beginning. And you know, when you plant trees, you're going to get to check the soil out as well. But the things you're looking for is that nice deep dark colour. That's something you can work on. If it's not there in the first place, that's what you're aiming to work on over time. But yeah, worth digging a profile. And this is just giving you an example of that crumbly, aggregated sort of look that you're going for. If you can get your soil to the point where it's aggregated, you're 99% of the way there. That's just like, if you can show me soil that's aggregated, I'll show you healthy plants. 99% of the time. It's just it's at that point where things are really working and functioning well. And you can also test the stability of aggregates. So this is something where you put the aggregates in water, and if they don't disperse, you know your water's stable and the rain's not going to affect it. It's holding together. The water stable aggregates. You know, I'm going to flick. Let me just have a look at this. So, I kind of thought I had it in a slightly different order. I only just did this presentation this week. I could probably get a lot quicker on the screen, but bear with us. There we go. No, yes, there. I just want to go to an actual soil analysis. So, when you do your normal soil tests at labs, they won't give you this type of soil test. This is called a total nutrient soil test. And what they do is they test everything that's in the bank. So it's not just the soluble parts of your soil nutrients. It's also what's in the biology, what's sort of in the organic matter. All of that stuff goes into it, and also a little bit of what's in the minerals. So it's kind of like a mining assay, and it's kind of like having a bank account, where you've got lots of money, but your drawing account might not always be. You might not be able to take that money out all the time. But if you get your biological activity going and everything really good, you might actually have quite a lot of money to use, basically, like a big nutrient pool. Whereas a traditional soil test, it just tells you what you can draw out, and it might say, you can't draw out much, so you add more to it. And you've actually got a big bank account already there that you can just get them working for you. Now, having said that, not many of the grey sandy soils have big bank accounts, unfortunately. I use the soil because it's got a couple of different soils from the site, and you can see if we look at the nutrients, they've got sort of basic reference levels here of, so for calcium you want at least 1,000 parts per million in there, and if we look across, these two soils are really good, they're over 2,000, but then this one here is around 700. So this is, all the numbers on this side you'll see are a bit lower. We look at magnesium, all of these are a bit lower in magnesium. If we look at potassium, these two are quite low. This one's really low in it. We're looking for about 200. Let's just look at phosphorus, for instance. That's another one that's pretty important. So this one's got good levels, not so good. And then we get down to some of the traces, and we're looking at things like boron. It's like less than 2 parts per million, almost non-existent. Cobalt can be quite low. A lot of these things, copper's low in this one. It's lower than all of them actually. The iron, as you can see, is pretty choppers. You've got plenty of iron in there, and quite a lot of manganese as well. So that just gives you an idea of what's in the bank, and that's kind of a handy thing, because if you haven't got it in the bank, it doesn't matter how much biological activity you get going, it's not there. So, there is a bit of everything there, but the plants are going to have to go a lot further to get it, a lot more activity and so on. And so, in a soil like this, you might think, okay, on a seasonal basis, I'm going to look at topping up my potassium and my magnesium a little bit, and whatever it might be that's low, and just be aware of that and think about how you can supplement your feed a little bit. Alright, I'll go back the fast way if I can. Yeah. Maybe not. Rewind.
So Mark, you're showing us that not all of us are probably going to be able to go and do that sort of a soil analysis. So we're looking with our eyes and going, oh, I've got a magnesium deficiency.
Yeah.
But then you have to be careful, don't you, when you start adding trace elements to the soil, because it's a slow process, isn't it? You don't just want to go, oh, we're down here at 4.5, we want to get it to 6.
Yeah, some nutrients you've got to be careful because if you add, especially soluble nutrients, every time you add, so like say you're low in potassium, and you add sulfate of potash,
Yes.
if it's soluble, the amount you need to fix your soil balance is quite a lot, but then it's soluble, so when the plants are taking up water, they're going to have to take that up, and it's too much for them. I mean, if you're not going to do a soil test, sometimes just looking at your soil, chances are if you've got a sandy soil, it's going to be lower in a lot of things because it doesn't hold on to things, so over time they've leached out. If you've got a clay soil, it's probably got a bit more of a bank in it, and you just look at the colour and a few things like that. But yeah, a total nutrient soil test costs about $80, but sometimes the labs have a processing fee where they charge $30 just to process it, and if you send them 10 samples, they still only charge $30 processing. But with each, if you only send one, you get that on top of the yeah. Yeah, I think that's sort of in a nutshell. I mean, we could go into sands and silts and clays, but that's not what this is about today, really. Yeah.
So it's when you sort of start your orchard, so you dig the hole, seal the soil.
Yeah.
You might have a soil test or not. What would you put in the base of that hole?
Yeah. So I'm going to get to that, but I mean, my basic premise is that in nature, the organic matter goes in on the top, like it always goes in from the top or through roots. Whereas the mineral base is what's in the soil, the bulk soil. So I tend to not add, when I'm planting anything, I tend to focus more on mineral fertilisers in the planting because the soluble fertilisers and even the compost, it's not a natural environment for it, where it's low oxygen, where it can burn the biology, it can cause problems with water and all that sort of stuff. So I tend to put minerals in the planting hole. And if I look at a total test like that and I'm starting an orchard, now's my chance to get those minerals into the soil when I'm digging the hole to plant the tree, whereas later on I'm not going to be able to get them in there so easily because you can't dig anymore, your tree's already in the ground. So that's a great opportunity, and because you're only doing the tree holes, you can actually afford to buy quite a lot and make sure it's quite rich in the whole planting hole of minerals and sort out those problems there. Yeah. Whereas a lot of people put lots of compost and things in the planting holes, and it creates quite a different. Sometimes you dig those trees out later, you don't realise it from above. But the roots have all colonised the nice composted area, and then they hit another area, and it's totally different. And it's kind of weird. They don't develop as they should really, but they don't get that natural sort of extension. So with your orchards, and this is just going into some just orchard basics. There's a lot of different types of fruit trees, as we know, and they have different management requirements. So if you're planting an orchard, you've kind of got to think of those because, you don't need to net some trees. So why would you pay a fortune for a big netted area and put trees in there that you don't need to net? You'd rather do a smaller netted area and just focus on the ones that you need to net. Some trees need more water than others, some don't need any water. So you might put the trees you need more water in an area. So it's good to kind of think of the groupings. And you'll notice that when we went out to Murray's Orchard, the netted area, it was all these deciduous temperate fruiting species which the birds love. They're high maintenance, you've got to prune them, you've got to water them in summer, you've got to feed them, you've got to protect them from the birds. And so they have very similar requirements and they need that same setup. So it makes sense to group them together. So it includes things like the stone fruit, the pine fruit, persimmons, all the things birds will eat, vines like grapes, and the canes like berries and that sort of thing. So it makes a lot of sense to put them in your netted orchard, basically. Blueberries are an evergreen, so they're not deciduous, but they also need protection from birds, so I tend to put them in there as well, and they also need netting. That's just, showing like some basic netting on an orchard. Not so easy when you've got random trees everywhere. It's much easier if you put all of them together. And if you've got them in rows, you can do hoops, tunnels that you can net and drag the net on and off, or you just have them closed in structures. But individual trees placed around Who's done it? Put nets on individual trees, taking them off every season. It's a bit of a pain in the butt, isn't it? You forget, and they break through and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, I think if you can group them, it will grow, and at least it makes a lot of difference. These are more your evergreen species. So we looked out there, the avos, citrus, sapotes. They don't. Sometimes the birds and wildlife will get them, but they're not generally as bad. They don't need as much netting as a deciduous orchard, so you can probably get away without it. And but they do need a lot of water. They need a lot of food. They're really tropical. They're hungry feeders, and so yeah, I like to group these in an area, or at least keep them separate from the deciduous species, because they don't need to go over in that. That's just an example of one, an avocado tree. And then you've got your really hardy fruit and nut species. So these are low maintenance. You find that if you can establish them, get them through the first summer, you probably don't even need to water them to keep them alive. However, a little bit of water will help them fruit better. But they're very hardy. They don't, you know, the birds will eat them to some degree, but they generally come in hard shells and things like that, so they're pretty good. And yeah, just really low maintenance. So you could put them further away. You don't have to go to them every day and prune them and take care of them. You can just let them do their thing and go and pick them when the nuts fall or whatever it might be. That's just some examples of those. That's just an English mulberry and a fig tree. Easy to propagate too. Both of these are propagated from cuttings. And it's pretty good fun when you see a little cutting turn into a tree like that. That's the white Adriatic thing. I love it. It's such a good thing. Yeah. Kikuyu. So if you inherit an area of kikuyu, it's probably worth taking the time to get rid of it before you plant the orchard. And especially before you put up fences, because once it gets into the fences, it's really hard to get rid of. You know, like, I love the weed mat. So this is an example. This is 5 metre wide weed mat, and I've just peeled it back from this side just to show. But yeah, basically you can see we're smothering the whole lot. I need to take care of the kikuyu around the trunks. And so that's what I'm doing here, and then I'll put the weed mat back on and really overlap it. And I've done this in summer because you can kill the pipestone dead in about 2.5 months in summer, totally dead.
How long does your weed mat last?
I've got stuff that's over 10 years old. And
So where do you buy it?
you buy Pope, so if you go to your Ag's Plate, go for Pope Supplies weed mat. It's hardy, it's thick, and when I cut it, I get salvaged at the edges, but when I cut it, I salvage it with a blowtorch as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just rough cut, because that will not be salvaged
Because
when
we
you
did
cut.
buy one lot from Bunnings and it
Yeah.
lasted about 6
Oh,
months and
There's some
disintegrated.
terrible weed mat out there, and like I keep telling the Ag Supplies, stop stocking it, please. It's an environmental hazard. But
It was.
it's just
really
cheap and nasty, so they
Yeah.
keep supplying it, but it's terrible. It's absolutely
Yeah.
terrible. So yeah, I mean, you can use other things. You can get silage tarps, they're really good. You can get hold of silage tarps.
Recycled on carpet.
Recyclable carpet, whatever you can use. I mean, some things, yeah. Some,
The kite takes over the car.
yeah, you got the carpet's a bit funny. It can disintegrate as well and cause problems and all that. But it's really, kikuyu is a C4 grass that loves sunlight, and if you can deprive it in the summer, in winter when you smother it, it tends to just lie there dormant. And
You're
it comes
laughing
back
at you.
like 4 months to kill it, whereas summer 2 months, so half the time. You know, again, edges, so like you can see, this is going to keep growing in from that edge, so you know, you could rotary hoe or whatever. You could use things like the chicken tractor systems we talked about around the edge of your orchard, just as a moat. Yep.
With it, I guess it's because they combat the trees for water.
Yeah.
Is that the problem?
Yeah.
Something I haven't seen a lot here, but growing up in New Zealand, when we mow the lawn, we actually put a ring of the lawn clippings around the tree,
Yeah.
not touching the trunk.
Yeah.
And that stops the pipe growing up through it. I
Yeah.
don't have a problem with
Yeah, right.
it.
Yeah.
So like a really thick
It's
moss.
actually
Yeah, we always do that,
really
so-
thick,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's thick, but it
There's a lot
kills
of-
the grass.
Yeah,
Because it's so hot.
yeah.
It gets really hot and it also holds the moisture there
Oh, yeah.
for the tree.
Yeah, I have seen mulches this thick kill pike,
Yeah.
but it's sometimes, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes. And then once it gets through, it's got to be blanketed because it grows from the edges and it just keeps supporting itself. And cooch is pretty bad too.
Will
Yeah.
the soil not breathe then if that becomes too high and hot? Is it
Yeah,
bad?
yeah. I think it's not. It goes down pretty quick.
Oh, but I mean just mulching in general, of
Yeah.
not breaking the grass.
The weed mat's great because it's got pores in it, and actually when you take the weed mat off, you'll see underneath there's like all the little critters scurrying, and, like it's really living environment, and it helps the grass break down. So normally before I do this, I'll sprinkle some blood or something, weed matter, come back in 2 or 3 months, and I'll show you, like, it's just such a, it actually almost prepares the soil for you. I use it in the veggie garden, orchards everywhere. But I'm not encouraging everyone to buy heaps of synthetic weed mat, but it is very effective, and if you can use it the right way and really look after it, it can really do the job. Maybe there's an argument for spraying, like as an environmental, you look at the pros and cons, like rather than throwing weed mat in landfill, you're spraying with a herbicide once to just get rid of it, or twice at the beginning of an orchard and then that's it, versus, buying, I don't know, you have
But
to, or even,
it comes back, doesn't it?
yeah, you have to do repeat sprays and eliminate it, and then you have to be spot weeding if you do get any seed that sets or whatever. So I don't know which is better or worse. Even getting out with a tractor and cultivating it is disturbing and environmentally damaging and fossil fuels. So pick your battle. But if glyphosate, there's a lot of, the jury's out on, there's a lot of issues that are sort of surfacing with it. So I understand if you don't want to use it, but yeah, it's high to use. Fuselade's pretty good. Yeah, I think it is. It's very selective to the grasses too. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good option. It's not as vigilant. It's not as effective as glyphosate, but you couple of sprays and you can get it. Yeah, you get onto it. Yeah. There's another one, Basta. I haven't used much of it, but a lot of people are using Basta as well.
I
So-
did use that with this factor, the fuselage is a factor
Yeah.
in abundance.
Does a good
Quite
job.
good.
Yeah.
Does a good job.
Yeah.
Quite-
Yep, cool. Yeah, I know a lot of people are using it around dams and stuff with fuselade, so there's obviously less worry about it killing wildlife and different things like that. So
Yeah, because it needs the 4 to 6 hour drying time.
yeah, cool.
Is there any other reason to get rid of it? Like, it
If
makes
I
such
could-
a great lawn.
Yeah, it makes such a great lawn, and like if you manage it, it's fine. I mean, it does. It takes away from diversity. It's hard to establish anything amongst it, but you could probably get comfrey in there and a few things. And you do have to manage the trunks because it does kind of grow up and it sort of smothers things. So you have to manage it. Geese are really awesome. So you guys have got geese, they really love it. And I actually I've got miniature sheep that I put through my orchards as well, and they eat it. But you can't have them in there all the time, so the kite comes back. So sometimes the amount of animal pressure you need to kill the kite is actually detrimental to the ecosystem, if you know what I mean. So it's tricky because you're just trying to kill this one plant so hard, and everything else is gone, and the kite's still hanging on, laughing. And, yeah. If you can get rid of it in the first place, great. If not, that other thing of tilling it in summer a couple of times and then planting a cover crop straight afterwards in winter when it's less active and trying to smother it out like really dense cover crop.
Mark,
Yep.
if you've already put your trees in,
Yeah.
and you can see you've got weed mat, but
Yeah.
if you put any herbicides on, will it not kill the trees?
No, I mean, like it depends how you spray. Like this, systemic like Roundup, you've just got to be targeted, and Fusilade is selective, so it only kills the grasses, it won't kill the broadleaves. So you can use a selective herbicide like that, no worries. And yeah, I mean, this is another reason to have your trees and grow sometimes. It makes it easier for management, like traffic, inter-row cropping, mulching, mowing, weed mat, all that sort of stuff. It's all cool having artistic gardens, but practicality can sometimes suffer a little bit. And on that note, having orchards in amongst native bush is pretty much a waste of time. Yeah, so like keep away from the forest. Like, the notaceous species and catments and that, their roots are so invasive, they just steal everything basically. So you really struggle with any garden near bush. Yeah.
So do you leave the weed matting down and then mulch over top of that and then put
No.
on?
I never leave it permanently down.
So you just put it down, kill off the
Yeah,
kite?
if you leave it down, eventually seeds start germinating in it, it becomes
Yeah.
stuck, and so you put it down as soon as it gets hot, so like spring, summer, you can put it down anytime from probably November through to now, and before now because you want to give it time to kill, and it takes 2 or 3 months, and you just check under it, and then you lift it up and take it and use it somewhere else. And you've always got it there to bring it back if you need to do another dose, but then ideally if you've done it in summer, you're coming into autumn, and then you can seed the whole area with a cover crop or ground covers or whatever you want instead. And you can pretty much seed them in amongst the pike thatch, it's no problem. It actually creates a bit of fumes for you and all sorts of stuff. So
what about just putting a ring around the fruit trees with the weed matting and then putting a mulch on top and putting some green
Yeah.
in amongst that to try and get that happening?
Yeah, the kite will just keep growing in from the edges and will take over, and then it'll grow all through the weed mat and get stuck and become an environmental sort of like mess. So I think if you've got kite there, don't worry about it, it'll hit the weed mat. It never kills it. It needs to be blanketed. So this next photo I'll show you, that garden there, that was all kite period about 5 months before that photo was taken.
Wow.
So that was, I inherited the garden. I was sort of like consigned to do a demonstration garden at an eco village in Witchcliff, and it was all kite, and I just bought, like I said, 5 metre wide, 100 metre roll, and I just cut it into 20 metre lengths and laid them out side by side and did the whole area, killed all the kite, sort of marked out the beds and seeded a cover crop straight away, and that's sort of what it looked like. So autumn, obviously, it's a great time to prepare soil. We just talked about it this morning. You can add your mineral nutrients, you can seed a multi-species cover crop to smother weeds, generate mulch, etc., and get the biology going. Just for those of you that want a little bit of a look at autumn multi-species types of plants, that's a bit of a list, so we'll send that out to you. This is rates that you'd roughly use on a hectare, but you can always sort of just drop those down, to grams instead of kilos, or divide it however you want, or multiply it. Yeah, that's a custom mix, so you have to buy those things individually and add them. And one of the problems is that when you buy oats or peas or any of these things, you have to buy them in 25 kilo sacks, which is sometimes more than you need for a little garden at home. So you might want to talk with your neighbours and share the order or something like that.
I've never heard of Ceradella.
Yeah, it's a legume. It's a low growing, but it does get quite big with some spring. It's not vetch, it's similar to vetch, but it's kind of a low growing, it's a pretty cool legume.
Which Ceradella are you using, a pink or the yellow?
That's the pink one, yeah, but I think any of them would be good. I can't remember exactly which is which. One's French, Ceradella, Margarita. Margarita's the one I use, yeah.
Two around.
Yeah.
Why is it best time to fertilise in autumn as they're going into winter and they're
Yeah, so that's mineral fertilisers. So autumn's more the mineral side of things because the biology is going to work on it over winter and make it available in spring because of the moisture. Yeah. And you notice I put different families in there. There's different functional groups. And they're all, if you look at them, they're all expensive seed crops. They all produce a really expensive seed, and they're all annuals that die after the winter season. So they really fix this, improve the soil quickly, and they generate a lot of mulch, and they smother all the weeds as well. So great little tool for getting an area ready.
No, I was just going to say, did you then weed map those rows afterwards, or did you?
No, I didn't need to. I just let them grow and then just mowed it or grazed it or whatever. And I let them get quite mature to flowering and then went in there. And also, I lie. I did weed map strips just to plant vegetables. Yeah. But it all died by late spring anyway because they're all annual species that don't grow in the winter. Yeah.
So to add minerals, if you add rock dust, would that be good?
Yeah, that's one form of rock, and it's got certain things in it. There's so many different, like even lime is a mineral, dolomite, rock phosphate. So they've all got, some of them have got more of this than the others. Rock dust is kind of like low amounts of everything, in a way. Yeah, and it should be really cheap. A lot of us are buying rock dust. We're buying rock dust in buckets, and it's just from the basalt mines. It should be $15 a tonne if you go and pick it up in a truck. So you're paying a lot for a bucket of rock dust sometimes.
$100.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I know, it's ridiculous.
Sometimes at the back of Bunnings, you get it's the gravel that's been ground.
The blue metal.
It's the blue metal, it's been ground down.
Yeah, that's all it is.
That's
all it is.
We're all buying it by the bucket.
Yeah, so snake oil.
So that's probably heading over your way at some stage. I don't suppose the people who do your mix.
Yeah, they've got some nutrient ag and you just bring ahead because it's just about the end of the season. They might have sold out soon.
And you can ring they can Motor River can arrange to transport it to the Albany office too.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
So obviously there's a fee, but it's not too bad. They go fill the truck up with all sorts of stuff. So I've done that, go to Albany and bring up Motor River and get, because they've got all the bags there. Yeah. And then just say, can you send it to Albany?
So I think the Denmark co-op.
Okay, cool.
That's mineral nutrients different from mineral fertiliser, isn't it?
Yeah, no, not necessarily. It's the same. It just depends what minerals.
So this, the
From
fertiliser.
yeah, so that's a type of mineral. What it's got in it, you'd have to look at an analysis. Like I normally add a blend of like dolomite and rock phosphate, things that I know will give me all the macronutrients, but I'll talk a bit about them in a sec. Yep. Jane, do you want to? No, it's all good. Alright. So what's fruit to plant in your situation? Just some things to think about, like making it work with you, what time of year they bear fruit, thinking about extending your season, like if you're growing apples, you're early, mid, late, all of these things are considerations. I'm not going to go into them too deeply because it's like really everyone's going to be so different with their needs and what varieties are going to work for them, but just remembering that, there's a selection that you can choose from at different times of year. You've also got to think about, your conditions and in terms of what species are going to work when you grow them. It's going to make a huge difference. If you pick species or rootstocks that are not suited to your environment, you're going to have to work really hard to keep them disease-free and producing well. So looking at, the rootstocks that are suitable for that environment and, you've got the chill requirements, so not so like cherries or whatever it might be, is pretty important. How big they grow? Obviously, if you've got a small netted orchard, you don't want massive varieties, you might go more for your smaller things. Some trees are really big, like walnuts or chestnuts or whatever, whereas other things are naturally small, like, hazelnuts are a bit smaller, or berries, for instance, blueberries. Just in terms of sizes, you can get full size, like with your apples and your peaches and all that stuff, you can get full size, you can get 3/4, you can get dwarfs and you can get miniatures. I must admit I'm not a huge fan of dwarfs. I don't mind them in the apples and the pears, but I think as nectarines and peaches and pears, and plums, well, plums are okay. Nectarines and peaches, they're not the best. The reason being is that a dwarf it's got a small rootstock. So what happens is the rootstock's small, so it kind of doesn't really provide enough for the top to grow vigorously, even though the top is designed for a vigorous rootstock. And so it's kind of restricting, and a lot of time when people plant dwarfs, they have to work extra hard to feed it to kind of get the tops to grow even adequately. It's not so bad with apples and pears, but it is quite prominent with especially nectarines and peaches. Dwarf, they don't perform well, they die young, you have to feed them, like water them a lot. My preference, and there's still not many in Australia, is miniatures, which are the opposite. They have a dwarf top, but a big root system, and the top stays small because of that, but they've got this huge supply, and they produce an amazing amount of fruit for the size that they are, and you can get some good miniature peach varieties and maybe some nectarines, but they're not readily available in Australia. You can get some, but in places like America, there's a lot of miniatures. I'm a big fan of going for 3/4 trees, and you just prune them so like the right way. So when a tree has a lot of nutrients and water, and what it puts its energy into it is one of two things. There's a hormone system. One of the things will be vegetative growth, the other thing will be fruiting, and they're opposing. So if it's putting energy into vegetative growth, it's not going to fruit as much. If it's putting a lot of energy into fruiting, it's not going to grow as much. Obviously you need to balance it because you need some growth to support new leaves and eventually production, but you can kind of keep your trees in a more reproductive state by the way you prune them, and summer pruning is part of that, and the way you prune, not too hard sometimes, and all of that stuff. If you train a tree from a young age, you shouldn't have to ever really cut anything thicker than about a pencil thickness, all the way through its life, except for maybe when there's renovation at a really later stage. So if you can prune them well, and you can maybe start to bring summer pruning into the equation, and it's kind of like another workshop, so I don't want to go into it, but anytime your plants are finished fruiting, you can prune them. So like when your nectarines finish and your apricots, you can prune them at that stage of year, and then it will cap their growth. It'll encourage more fruiting wood, and it will stop them from growing so vigorously. Whereas your winter cuts are going to encourage vegetative growth, and especially hard winter cuts. So yeah, if you can get a 3/4 size tree and you prune it well, you can actually keep it quite low. I'm a big fan of low trees and not letting them get away too big. Pollination requirements, what do they need, and someone was talking about apples before. Just learning what they need in terms of like avocados need an A and a B variety and different sorts and so on. And then there's susceptibility to common diseases in that area. So some varieties are more resistant than others. And the rootstock's a big one. So you have to give it a nerd to start getting into what rootstocks are right for what environment. But there's people that are nerds that you can ask. Nurseries should have an idea. So that's just a chart, just giving you an idea of what fruits when. It's not 100% accurate, this chart, but it gives you an idea. And so, you're looking at what sort of things do I need to get some fruit this time of year? What sort of things do I need to get some fruit this time? This is for more of a household production than commercial, but just thinking about what, getting fruit all year round basically. And then just looking at the room and size. So big trees, have you got the space for them? Medium and smaller, Okay, sourcing good stock. This is really important as well. So when you buy a fruit tree at an orchard, at a nursery, the temptation is to buy the biggest looking one there, and often the biggest looking ones are the ones that were from the year before, and they've had to pot one, and so they're actually quite restricted in their root systems, even though they're big up top. You're much better looking at the root system rather than the top of the tree, kind of like miniatures again. So when you go to a nursery, if you can, bare rooted, it's great because you can get to look at them. And you want a healthy looking tree, but it doesn't have to be big at the top. It's better that it has a well-developed root system. If they have been root bound in the pots, the roots start to corkscrew or grow in, and then they never ever fully recover. Trees are designed to grow out because that's where the topsoil is, and they're really designed to spread their roots. And when you're watering trees, ideally you want to encourage that spreading. So you want to water maybe one dripper line around it at first, and then another ring, and then another ring to get them out, or have sprinkler systems that actually water quite wide, because that's really what's going to support that growth out wide, and that's where the topsoil is. And then they have deeper roots that go down as well. Makes sense? Yeah. When's the best time to plant it? Obviously, deciduous trees best planted in the dormant season, and then evergreens probably more in spring. Is the time that they can also sometimes be planted late summer or early autumn. If you're really careful when you plant your tree, you can almost plant them any time. You're not disturbing the soil, but bare rooted is definitely in the dormant season. And you want to avoid transplanting when they're in a stressful time, when they're fruiting or whatever. So, Alright. A lot of information, you're all good, folks? It's after lunch, I know. Alright. Digging holes, again, because the roots go really wide, you want them wider and deeper than the roots of the tree. And ideally, you want to prepare in advance. So go as wide as you can, because ultimately the roots are going to grow out there, and if you get minerals in there and soften the soil, that's great. When you dig it out, generally I take the topsoil off first, put it to the side, and then you take the bulk soil out. And if you've got different sort of soil types, it might be worth separating them, but generally I get the bulk soil out, and then further loosening the sides with pitchforks and stuff like that, just to get it really softened so they can keep growing out. And if you're transplanting something that's got a big root system, rather than beating the root back into the hole, dig a trench and take it out, let it keep growing outwards. And then basically it's really important not to let the roots dry out, so especially bare rooted, you've got to keep them moist. So, and then you get them in the hole, and I normally backfill it with the original soil, and that would be the great time to add your minerals in as well, because you're filling it with minerals. So any minerals that you're short on. Spread the roots out so they're facing out, and the original soil, and then the topsoil at the end as well, because again that's designed to be on the top, and just firming it down a bit and watering it in. And obviously when you're transplanting, it's a great time to do some pruning, because it means there's less canopy that the roots have to support while they're getting reacquainted with their new environment. Provide protection from weather and pests. Many a time I've seen people plant fruit trees and then the roots come in like within a week or something, or rabbits and ringbark them, and it's just devastating. You've gone to all that effort, and then there's, so being aware of that and really protecting them is important. Ornaments you can backfill with. A general purpose blend there, that's just covering some of your macronutrients. I'll talk a bit about that in a sec. mature compost is great. Again, better in the topsoil than in the hole, in my opinion. Some people put it in the hole, and you can, but I reckon it's better where the surface feeder roots are. Mulch is great, of course, and putting carbon and nitrogen sources together, but not on the trunk. And you can use things like fish and seaweed and all these other biostimulants, and compost can be applied to help things along. And cover crops as well, if you can, around the trees. You really want to get the ground really covered, as much as you can, much plant action, as much mulch. And again, soluble nutrients, small regular doses better, and you can do fertigation foliar sprays as well. We'll talk about that in a second. We looked at that one. This is a sap test. This is of I think this is of a grapefruit, from memory. And this is a lab that does old and young leaves, because some of the nutrients are mobile and they move. So yeah, just looking at this is quite standard. I see this a lot. So here we have it. Iron is low, manganese is critically low, zinc is low, boron in the young leaves is very low, copper's low, molybdenum's alright, which is not always the case. You see how critically low these things are. Silica's that's iron, silica's alright. And then, like some of the other ones are alright, like that magnesium. Calcium's a bit low here as well. But yeah, just that, I show you that just because you see that all the time. Trace elements. So that's a plant testing, so tissue or sap, it's not soil testing, it's showing you what plants are getting. This is just some of the organic inputs you can buy, and it's great because it just shows you what's in what. So if you've got a soil that's low in, let's say phosphorus, you would look at the phosphorus column, and something like guano or rock phosphate might be the mineral fertilizer of choice. If you're low in, say, magnesium, it would probably be something like dolomite would be your best bet. Potassium might be something like sulfate of potash, or you might use one of those sort of ones like, phosphot's got a bit in there as well. It's a bit of both. So yeah, just helps you sort of get an idea of what you're getting.
Lime and, I'm sorry, I'm not a scientist,
No.
so lime and dolomite are similar, aren't they?
Yeah, the main difference is that dolomite has more magnesium in it,
Oh,
and
okay.
less calcium, whereas lime is like, quite high calcium, but
Okay.
not much else.
So it's a bit more balanced,
Yeah, it's almost balanced in favour of the magnesium, and lime's definitely balanced in favour of calcium, so sometimes a blend of both.
Yes.
Or, you get calcium in a lot of things. You get it in rock phosphate, guano, all of these things have got calcium in, so sometimes you find you put a few of those in, maybe you're better going with dolomite because you've already kind of taken care of the calcium.
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah.
I'm looking at that, I've never seen that.
Yeah, so I mean, we almost universally, I use a mix of dolomite. Gypsum I love because even though it's not high calcium, it's got some sulfur in it, and it's much more available. The calcium is like gyprock, it's much more soluble than in lime, so it gives you some calcium. But some of these things, like rock phosphate's great, guano's great. Some of these blends are good too.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's many more. Again, mineral amendments, so this is just like powder form, granular form, and again, this is like I'm making a trench here for like raspberries or something like that, so I'm just putting some in the soil, showing you the forms you can get them in. These are just pictures of some of your biostimulants that you can use, seaweed, really great, fastest growing plant on the planet, so it's full of all these hormones and stuff that help plants grow. Fish is awesome, it's got lots of protein in it, in amino form already. It's not just nitrogen, it's got some phosphorus and calcium in it as well. This is a mycorrhizal inoculant. So you can buy specific mycorrhizal inoculants for fruit trees. And if your soil's really not that good, it might be a good idea to add some mycorrhizal inoculant. So you buy it, it's in a powder, and you just make a liquid and you water it over the roots with your watering can. You can use them with your cover crops as well. Molasses is just microbe food, and this is like straining some compost to make an extract. I don't even know what those ones are. I normally blend a bunch of them together.
Molasses.
Yep.
I've got beehives that end up with a bit of molasses looking honey
Yeah.
after I've done my
Yeah.
extraction.
Yeah.
Is it okay
Yeah.
to put on fruit trees?
Yeah, I've read some really good scientific papers about Boston. Yeah. And
So
it's
keep-
sugar,
keep pouring it on.
Yeah, I mean,
It's usually the,
yeah, I mean, again, it's all balanced, you know, you don't want to just like pour heaps on, but a little bit of honey is
I kind of pour it in between the
Yeah.
trees, like,
Yep.
and move my way.
Yeah, great.
Mark, just another question with worm juice. Is that pretty even across elements and minerals, or is it lacking in much?
It's hard to say. I mean, what you feed your worms is kind of what's going to come out the other end.
Yeah.
But in some ways, with compost and worm farms, what you feed them, it's like, you know, they say you get what you put in. I think you get more than what you put in the sense that they actually make it available and they, you know, do these organic processes, so it actually becomes very, like, value added. Whatever you, so if you put dolomite in your worm farm, that magnesium gets worked on by the worms and becomes very plant available. So it's actually, it's not just what you put in, but it's actually adding to what you put in.
Yeah. So if you bought it from the shops, stuff like that, could you use it in lieu of other stuff, or would it
depends how
only
much
have
you
it?
put on.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, remembering again that microbes like worms and the bacteria in there, they are going to get a balance of the nutrients in their cells, and they're going to do some of the balancing for you. So it is a pretty broad spectrum fertilizer, but you need quite a lot to add of compost or worm castings to change your nutrient levels compared to buying something in a sack that it's quite high analysis, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Sometimes too high analysis. One thing with worm juice too is, like, a lot of people will just collect the worm juice that comes out of their worm farm, they put water in and the juice comes out. But normally that's like, unless your worm farm is already like mature and it's broken down to worm castings, that's often a mix of veggie juice and worm casting, and it actually, the microbes are still all alive in it, and they just drown in the water and it gets all smelly and stuff. It's not the best. You're actually better like just keeping it moist, but then when it's got to the point where it's very mature, the microbes have gone more dormant and they've also kind of worked through all the sugars and everything, and so then when you make a liquid extract out of it, it's much more stable and you know, healthier, and also when the dormant microbes, when you put them out, they survive better, whereas if they're alive and you put them out, normally there's fight, you know, there's some, might be too dry or whatever, but if they're dormant they can just wait until the time's right.
I think somebody told me that you should flush.
Flush them, I know, people always say this stuff, you know, that to make really good extracts you should use mature compost, mature worm castings, everything's dormant, they've gone through lots of populations, released lots of good stuff into it. Alright, back to quality nutrition. So yeah, just talking about trace elements, this is like nutrient use efficiency in agricultural systems. It was like a meta data study, so you know, across the world. And you're looking at these trace elements and what people put out. This is about how much of it actually ends up being used by the plants. 1 to 2%. It's pretty bad, isn't it? Things like phosphorus are pretty low too, like 15, 20. So, you know, the amount of phosphorus we put on, we should have 5 years of phosphorus in that, and the amount of trace elements we put on, donkey's years. So they're just not getting taken up by the plants because of these soil issues that I've talked about. So we need to think of other ways. And when it comes to trace elements, they are super important. We shoot ourselves in the foot when we don't give them the respect they deserve. If we look at their roles in plants, this is photosynthesis, which we've talked enough about that, haven't we? We've convinced you that photosynthesis is the most important thing on the planet. Iron is part of the chlorophyll molecule. Manganese splits the water molecule for the photosynthesis reaction. They are crucial for photosynthesis. Probably most of our crops across Australia, across the world, are photosynthesizing at less than half the capacity that they can, simply because they haven't got enough iron and manganese. Yeah. So we can really boost that by getting those in there. Protein synthesis. So when Murray was talking about nitrates in his plants, you need these minerals to enable the plant to convert nitrate into amino acids and proteins and peptides and all these other compounds. So unless you've got these elements in there, molybdenum, manganese, iron, that's not going to happen, and your plant's going to be full of all the sappy nitrate, which the pests just love, and they're not going to grow healthy. And then you look at your reproduction. So we're in an orchard, flowering, pollination, fruit set, fruit fill, really important, these trace elements. Sure, the macros are important as well, but just saying that we should not ignore them, and we often do.
So getting trace elements in after you've got like I've inherited a
Yeah.
garden.
Yeah.
How do you drill a hole or?
Nah, like this.
Ah.
So that's just I've just given you a recipe. That's making up an IBC, which is an awful lot. You guys probably not going to need that much unless you've got a really big orchard. But you could you just reduce the rate. So if you were doing a hectare amount, you divide that whole lot by about 50, to get the rates. If you're doing a home garden, maybe you just want to buy one of those. Have you seen those little Manutech trace element in Bunnings? They're like a powder.
Yeah.
So you can just get one of those. And then you mix it with, these things are what makes it, right, it puts them into organic molecules that are more stable and bioavailable. So things that you could use, formic acid, seaweed, fish, all of these are organic acids that in the soil they naturally occur, organic acids, and they wrap up nutrients in organic molecules, which is again what plants love. They don't love salt, not that much. They'd much rather have their minerals in an organic molecule. So you can mix your trace elements with some of those biostimulants, fish, citric acid, formic acid, seaweed, molasses, any of those organic things, they were once living. And you can add other things to it too, if you want, like some of the macros. And these are just rates you put out per hectare. I'll tell you what, I'll send you a more homemade recipe. That's a bit big for most of you. So I guess where you need a bucket.
I was thinking of converting it to grams.
Yeah, convert to grams.
So the granular Manutech, you reckon it's better than the liquid one?
The liquid one, they use an EDTA chelation, which is there's different thoughts on whether that's better than an organic chelation or not.
So for the Manutech, you have to use quite a lot of it, like 3/4 of a container.
Yeah, so they often rip you off when they pre-make the liquids too, because a lot of it's just liquid,
Yeah.
Like it's funny, when we make up these IBCs, for farmers, and they pay about $3.5 grand for an IBC of trace elements, we make them up for like $100. So, it's quite, not $100 actually, they're about $500. You make up for 200 for about $100. So yeah, we save a lot of money by making them ourselves. But the little powders, probably, those bottles are not that expensive.
Yeah, and then there's also the green, like a Yates sort of bottle of trace elements.
Yeah.
I've used that a lot on my citrus, and I just spray.
Yeah.
And it works actually
Yeah, it works really well.
But I think you can't, it says on there you can't put, you have to use soak for stone fruit.
Yeah.
You can just put it in a can and then.
Okay. Yeah.
And soak.
I just picked some orange juice. It's just got a slight manganese deficiency, talking about manganese. You can see the yellow between the veins. It's just really common. If you are going to apply them, it is good to, like those powders that you get, definitely mix them with an organic acid because it keeps them in that. You remember how I showed you iron wasn't available once the
organic acid, sorry?
any of these, formic acid, citric acid, or fermented products like fish or fermented seaweed. You don't get much fermented seaweed around though. So fish is a good one. And that soil dynamics fish, I think you guys get it here, hey?
Yes.
That's a really good one. Oh, fish horse, fish horse is good too.
One.
Yep.
Just if you had a smaller ramification, could you use things like cider vinegar or something like that for your acid component for that?
Probably could, but you have to be careful. Yeah, you probably could. I just don't know how much you can use. I'm not experienced with it. But I know some people make like an eggshell or bone preparation with vinegar, and the dilution that they use is quite low. It is pretty acidic.
And then another question, could you run that with, as part of the bubbler, brewed aerobic compost tea?
Maybe. There might be some clashes between the organisms that naturally inhabit vinegar and what would be the compost tea. Compost teas are quite hard work. You're going to get a lot of things right. And they're best for the soil. Remembering you're kind of like almost spoon feeding microbes food and giving them air, and then you throw them out in the environment and expect them to survive. It's pretty rough. Maybe it helps coat the leaves because there is a lot of organisms in them, but the survival rate's pretty low. Whereas an extract is kind of like dormant microbes, and just put it out in water, and it's a little bit easier in a way. So you make up a bucket, it lasts you for ages. You don't need much of them.
And what, are we spraying this on all our fruit trees?
Yeah, and under the leaves, there's a lot of holes on the underside of leaves. It's interesting, isn't it, how plants, dicots, that grow with leaves that are horizontal have more of the holes under the leaves.
Yeah.
Anyone know why that is?
So they don't drown anyway.
Yeah, that might be one reason. Yeah, but it's
Not
not.
receiving things from the ground.
They get actually carbon dioxide from the microbes breathing in the soil, and you wouldn't think carbon dioxide is a limiting factor, but in hothouses, they pump them up with carbon dioxide to make things grow more. So plants evolved with microbes breathing out carbon dioxide from the soil, so we know that we should have lots of microbes.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I don't need to convince you guys though. Ground covers, just quickly, I mean, we've gone through the cover crops, we've looked at those. In orchard situations, you can use perennial species, low-growing, herbaceous species, probably better than woody species. Murray showed you some great examples of those already, so I don't need to go into them too much. Flowering species, really important. Anyone here come across Helen Natal's book? Ecological Garden? No?
Yeah, got it, yeah, really,
Yeah.
really,
I recommend
really
it.
good book.
If you're into eco orchards, Helen Natal, is it?
Yeah, ACCHOWE.
And it's called the Ecological Garden.
I'll bring it out and put it on the table if I can find it. It's
That's
sort of
really cool.
growing your own fertility where she does
Cover crops,
and she mows and throws them in, and
That's
she had to,
insects.
she learnt all this stuff at uni and then had to just throw it all out and go, well, I've got, they said I couldn't have all this nitrogen, but I've got too much nitrogen, and so it's someone who's had fruit trees, veggie gardens, works as an extension officer, and does, she's been in the game for a long time, and she's got some really interesting stuff. I mean, one thing I love that she says, I don't want my predators to kill me the work. So it's about having diversity and having things mixed up, and so
living right there.
We've had it. Okay, I'll see if I can get it. But well
What
worth
was she
the read.
called? Attel?
Atal.
ATTHOWE, Helen, and someone can probably Google that.
There's lots of species you can plant as flowers. You can plant, like rocket in your orchard. Like one of my favourite activities at the end of, like around Christmas time, all your veggies that have gone to seed, like your dill, your rocket, your coriander, your lettuce, you sort your seed out, but you always end up with lots of chaff and stuff, and seeds in that chaff. So you just go spread it around your orchard. And then when the rain comes in autumn, you get a wild harvest of rocket and coriander and various things. So you can grow a lot of edible stuff. But lots of brassicas, lots of daisy family you can grow in the orchards that are really pretty and beautiful zinnias and all these sort of things. The dill family or carrot family, really good for wasps. Like they have those flowers that attract lots of wasps, thrips and stuff. Lamiaceae, that's the herb family, so you can put mints and ground covers like that. Lamiaceae, which is the onion family, bunching garlic, bunching onions, leeks, also really cool. That's like your silver beets and spinaches. Buckwheat, it's a really good one, attracts bees. And this is borage. Again, just so many things. You can then go to flower and attract the insects, and they're just, predators and all that sort of stuff. And many edible species that you can include in the mix if you want to. Pumpkins, one of the best pumpkin crops I ever grew was in an avocado orchard. They water avos in summer. They just mulched the whole lot with the compost. Every tree had got a load of compost and they had water on it. I was like, I just walked along and I just put a seed next to each tree. There was like 800 trees in the orchard. We got bins and bins of pumpkins that year. We were feeding them.
How much more water does it take?
To grow a pumpkin?
Well, not.
I mean,
even just adding all this underneath the fruit trees.
So there's a school of thought that they're going to take water up. I mean, obviously, if you're growing them in winter, that's not an issue. In summer, they will take water up. But you've also got to understand that the water is going into, there's transpiration, but there's also water going into cells and it's into those sticky gels in the soil and jellies and also in the plants. The residue, when it's carbon, you build up your carbon, your water holding capacity is so much more. And also the infiltration and all that. So, there is that thought that it's going to take more water up, and maybe, if you feel like water restriction's a problem, maybe you wouldn't put as much in summer, but definitely when winter's on, you can go for it. Good. So we are getting to the end now, folks. Just talking about some of these, like food forests, totally different approach, like low maintenance, plant them, and they kind of look after themselves to a degree. Still can be really useful, for food, fodder, all sorts of stuff. And they do all these landscape services, they create wildlife corridors, windbreaks, etc., etc. And, you can use some of these trees in your establishment phase. So when you first plant an orchard, it's quite common to put in like legume trees, grow some legumes. And I've got there's a great, a friend of mine in Mark River, he's got a great orchard. He's got all sorts of stuff in there, like aloes and citrus and a lot of South American fruit. But he's interplanted it with native legumes, native acacias and cape blue and wattles and things like that. And he just cuts and drops them, and they're putting legumes in, they're attracting birds, insects, and it's nitrogen fixing, and it's just adding to the whole lot. So it doesn't just have to be ground covers; it can also be trees in amongst your orchard. And anyone here heard of syntropic agriculture? So syntropic agriculture, they're growing like eucalypts and all sorts of things in with the target species. So they might be wanting to plant mulberries, they'll plant eucalypts, rhubarb, silver beet, and they'll plant the whole lot together, and then from there on in the job is just chopping and mulching the things out that you don't want to favour each, at each stage of succession, and eventually you get down to just your main trees. And it's great because you're constantly putting stuff into the soil and creating mulch.
Is that also the theory that syntropic farming, that when you chop something back, then that plant releases a hormone?
Yeah, it creates a
for
flush.
growth?
Yeah, so
which the other plants feed off, and also.
Yeah, so they create these growth pulses with chopping, and yeah, the trick is to put a succession of species in there, and there's like your first succession pulse that you're going to chop out first, and then the next one, and the next one, and eventually it's just big trees. And another little trick that they do in some tropics that's really cool, I was just talking to Sarah about at lunchtime, is that they've got a blank paddock, not a kikuyu one, but just a paddock, like ryegrass, whatever. They let it grow so it gets quite mature, but not setting seed, and then they cut it, slash it, and make windrows, really deep windrows, like 1/2 metre high at least, and you make them as wide as you need to get them to that height, and then they leave it over summer because it's been mulched. There's a lot of good activity under the mulch, but it also smothers the weeds, and then when the following rainy season comes, they part the mulch and plant a row of stuff right down the middle of it, and because the soil's so good and there's so much mulch, weed control, it survives. The survival rate of the trees is really good through the first summer. So that's just a little trick you can use, maybe.
Does that only work with ryegrass?
No, it works with just not kite. So you're looking at annual species, so you just slash them, all your weeds, your thistles, the whole lot. Try not to let them get to seed because otherwise the seed will grow in the mulch as well. This is I'm just showing you pictures of wild orchard setups like broad beans. Murray showed you enough of this. This is something we like to do a lot. It's like if you've got an orchard, you grow cover crops on the side or interrows, and you just slash it and you chuck the mulch onto the trees. And that's a really great strategy. I mean, those aloes are getting mulched beautifully. And yeah, so there's the weeds and stuff as well. Whew, pests and diseases. This is the last bit, folks. Maybe we should save it for question time. How's the tea?
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.